Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting insight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on conceal carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell, and Dan Sams is out this week. As we mentioned last week, he was going to be on vacation. So I have a special guest. I have a man who I've paid a small fortune to over the last couple of years, Michael Hernandez. Michael, welcome to the From Concealment Podcast.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
Michael is a firearms instructor. In fact, I'd like, Michael, if you could tell everyone a little bit about what got you into this, because your story, I think, might be a little bit more unique because you were actually sought out as a firearms instructor. I know people literally have flown to you from all over the world to go through your training, and you're not ex-military. And that's usually what you see is like some ex-military guy who's, doing this, but you were a civilian who got into this. So tell everyone a little bit about your story of how you got into it.
Oh gosh, that's such a great intro, though. I don't think I can beat it. It's very true. I don't have any prior military experience, unfortunately. I've got big flat feet, so that doesn't help me any. And I never did any PD experience, but a lot of the jobs I had prior to becoming a firearms instructor, I was a photojournalist for the Orange County Register for almost 20 years. And we all shot guns. It was just something that photography and guns, it seemed to work together. But at that time, back in the late 90s, we did a lot of training with the police departments. We got a lot of training with the SWAT departments and the police on how to be involved in things with them, along with fire departments. It was a different time. So they would train us and show us, how to deal with riots, how to be involved in a riot, or how to be involved in domestic calls and things like that. So we wouldn't get injured, but we could be up on the front lines with them. So that really piqued my interest there, and that gave me some insight. I've always had a lot of friends who were in the military. And they've always given me lots of insight and training. And then over the past 7 years, I actually fell into being a full-time firearms instructor. And I've taken all of that knowledge from all those years and all that training, and I've rolled it into the ability to take other civilians and even police and military and help them out. So, I've built, I guess, a reputation for myself as being an approachable instructor. I think the thing that most people say about me is that, gee, you weren't what I expected. I thought you were going to be yelling at us and drilling us in the ground. And I think that's people's expectations of a firearms instructor. They see the military type of firearms instructor, and I'm far from that. I think
too, that's also very much the gun culture. Like in other states, I think there is just huge amounts of ego. Oh, yeah. And there's not that, at least in all of the training that I've gone to with you, there's us being cut-ups and whatnot, but not genuine ego, I'm the greatest guy ever. So
no, I'm not. I'm actually, I would consider myself a fair shooter, but I would consider myself a better than average instructor, simply because I've been teaching something. Teaching is a passion of mine. So I've been teaching something in my life for 30 years. And right now I'm teaching firearms. So you can take a lot of that knowledge base. I think that reflects. There's some phenomenal shooters out there in the world who can outshoot anybody and do a lot of things. But being able to do something and be able to teach something are two different things. Fortunately, I can relatively hold my own against everybody. My greatest moment of pride would be when my students can best me. I love that. That means that I've gotten them to a good level. So I'll do good.
And I will say that demo. I think you are being a little bit humble there, because whenever we've done any type of competition with TJ or anybody, I'm always happy when you go first, because you kind of show us, here's how you actually run this stage properly. And we know what the bar is.
Okay. Well, so I appreciate that.
I think you're definitely better than just a fair shooter.
Okay. I'll take it. Thank you. I'll leave it at the table at that. So, actually speaking to TJ with All Safe Defense, I was doing competitions, with him about almost 8 years ago now. And I fell into it right after FT3 had opened. When I started up in Brea. I mean, the very first range I shot at when I was 18 a million years ago was up in Brea, Orange County shooting range. They were there. It still pretty much looks the same as it did when I was 18. My buddy
worked there when we were in college. He was a Navy SEAL who came back and went on the GI Bill, and then he went to go work there. And I remember somebody actually, unfortunately, killed themselves in the range, one of those situations.
Yep.
And because he was a SEAL, he was like, "Hey, if you guys need anybody to help clean up, I'm happy to go." And we were like, "Okay, that's just weird. That's just weird."
It happens. Unfortunately, it's a advantage that people take at virtually every single range in the United States. Somebody will walk into a range and unfortunately take their life to do that. We at FT3, we have a lot of precautions in place to try to prevent that, but nobody is immune to it, and it's an unfortunate side effect of firearms. And unfortunately, it's also one of the leading causes of uses of firearms in the United States. But and unfortunately, people do that at ranges because of the not necessarily access, but I feel that they because we have protocols in place to keep anybody from just walking in the street and picking up a firearm and doing those things. But I don't know if it's a comfort level or if it's they don't want to do something to the ones around them, but unfortunately they take it out on us, and that's a bad thing. But it does happen, and it's an unfortunate side effect. But on the other side, all the good things that happen at ranges, the training, the education from children to adults to older people is what's really what we're about, and giving people the opportunity to come out and to test their skills and hone their skills and become proficient and safe. And that's really the goal of every range, is to allow people a safe, family-friendly environment to come out and practice their Second Amendment rights.
Yeah. No, it's one of the things too that I always liked about FT3. And by the way, guys, FT3 is a range in Stanton, Orange County. I think it's the nicest indoor range in probably LA or Orange County. I haven't been to many in LA County, but I mean, it is definitely the nicest range. I mean, there are plenty of ranges in Orange County that I'm like, man, this is just, I feel like I'm walking into the ghetto. Just the range itself is.
One thing that helps is that we're one of the youngest ranges. I mean, we've been around for about 7 years. So we have that. There was a tremendous amount of design put into the range, and it reflects in the way the range looks. We try to make it a homey feel to a range. It's not what you think a gun range would look like. It's,
right.
It's a nice looking range when it comes in, and we spend a tremendous amount of time and energy to maintain that. We want that range to look good for a long time. So we put a lot of time and energy into keeping the range looking that way.
Yeah. And I will say this too, great staff.
Yep.
I don't know that I've ever known anyone to be a real jerk at the range. At least since I've been going there. Like, I still remember reading some Yelp reviews and people are like, "Oh, this guy is a jerk who works there." And I'm like, well, whoever he is, he must not be there anymore, because I've literally never met a jerk there. So it's cool.
Well, we know you're coming, so we always put the nice people out for you.
Yeah, there you go. Appreciate that.
No, we work very hard. It's very hard to find people to work in that environment, because we do a lot of things that we think we do right. We pay better than the average range. We try to find good people. We make sure that all of our RSOs, our range safety officers, who are in the red shirts, who help you at the counter and then help you out on the range, are NRA RSOs. They've been trained either by myself or by TJ or other people. They go through an extensive training program and they join the range. We just hired a new RSO recently, and they'll spend the next 2 weeks training before we even let them loose on the public. So we put a lot of time and effort into the people that interface with our public and keep them safe out on the range.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about CCW in California.
Okay.
Or even just
topics.
Yeah, and even just the gun culture in California, because I was told something like we've got 2 million more gun owners since the pandemic, and then obviously all of the riots and whatnot. What are you seeing on the front lines?
Oh gosh, well, I've been my call for training for basic is skyrocketed across the board. All instructors, we're all having to shift right now for the next several months and do a lot more basic training. Right now, I think this month I'll be on my 5th by the end of the month, which is really unusual. We usually do a basic training every other month, and now we're doing 5 a month. And there's 14 to 15 people in those classes at a time. That's just me. That doesn't include what AllSafe and OCSC and everybody else out there is doing. I mean, it's wild. We've also all noticed across the board that it's skewed. Typically, your average age of a person who comes into a basic training, both male and female, is typically you'll have a small percentage in their mid-20s who grew up with firearms. They're usually out-of-state people. They're not, in California, born and bred, guarded firearms. So they came out of state and they're here for jobs or whatever. And hey, when I grew up, I always shot guns. I just want to get up on California rules. And then you've got the late 40s people like, hey, the kids are growing up now. We're more comfortable about having a firearm inside the house. Husband's always wanted one, or I've always wanted one, but we didn't want one with the kids running around the house. But what we've really seen of lately is the skewing of well above the 60 range. 60, 70. We just had a lady in a class yesterday, 78. I asked her about that. She suddenly feels, after all these years of living in California, that the threat level is much higher for her, and she feels she needs a firearm. She did remarkably well. It's very interesting. You sometimes you look at these people and you don't want to judge them, but you're like, you're 80 years old. What are you thinking about? Put a big handgun in your hand, and they do well. And a lot of them have prior shooting experience. I had a young lady. I say young lady generously. She was probably about 75 the other day. Go through a class with me. She's like, "Oh, well, I've been shooting skeet and shotgun for 30 years. I've just never really done a handgun." Oh, okay, great. A lot of them did rifle and shotgun, so they got that experience kind of back there, and it comes back to them. But I also like to have the same conversation with everybody that statistically things haven't significantly changed in the past 20 years. I mean, the violence is actually down. Gun crime is not one of the top 10 killers in the U.S. Gun sales are up, but CCW licensing is up, especially in Orange County. But it's really the barrage of this instantaneous news that shows up in our pocket every 3 seconds and let us know what's happening. And it's always the most salacious stuff to get you to click through. And that's really what's happened. But the same number of children still disappear they did 20 years ago. The same amount of crimes are still happening, and they're on the downcline. So it just feels like everything's at our front doorstep right now. It feels like with the pandemic, the quarantine, the civil riots, everything going on, which we've had before. If we go back, these are all things we've gone through before. They just feel urgent right now because I think it's just this constant, Facebook and Instagram, everything just pushing this onto us at a constant level that makes everybody feel unsure. What I'm happy about is that people are going and taking these basic training classes. Right. Prior to this, a lot of people go and buy a firearm, all out, especially guys. We all know how guys are, right? Hey, I got this. I'll load this up. I'll keep it in the nightstand. I'll rise to the occasion. It'll be great. Nothing bad's going to happen. And when it comes push down, comes to shove, they don't rise because they don't remember the things they need to remember at that moment. But taking the attitude of I want to get some basic training, I want an understanding of where I want to be at before I purchase a firearm, I think is really good for people. So they can come out and find the gun they want, which is much better than, hey, I found a gun, now I want to learn how to use this gun. I think it's better to go and take the training, get exposure to a number of different firearms, find what may be comfortable for you, find what works for you, and then you can go shopping as a much more educated person. It's kind of like, it's not like buying a car. You can't take it back and do an exchange. Once you buy a firearm, it's yours. If you don't like it, you're going to have to sell it. But you don't get to go back to the dealer and say, hey, I'd like to try another one. It doesn't work that way with the registration process. So just like you said earlier, the dealer will buy it back from you if you don't like a gun, but you're going to take huge loss on it. Yep. They'll give you 20% of what you paid for it, and then they'll turn around and sell it for a big profit. So you have to make a commitment to a firearm, and it's good to go out and get that training and get that experience and sample guns first and find out what works best for you, because there's a gun for everybody out there, and everybody has special needs for it. But you have to think about what's the purpose of the firearm. So I'm seeing a skew to older people, much more aggressive, that the age is coming down in the other realm, that people are not waiting till their children are older. They're now feeling that children at home they're at an age that I can keep them safe from the firearm, which is a practical thing to do. And now they're getting their training a little bit sooner. But the classes are exploding. The sales are exploding. Right now, we have the biggest problem that right before the quarantine hit really bad, sales exploded tremendously, and it's emptied the shelves. Yeah. So there isn't a lot of firearms available for people currently. There's a lot of shotguns and rifles available, which are all good choices. I've had quite a few people coming to me that I got a 22 and a shotgun. Which one should I use for home defense? And, so we'll do a class on that, which is the two extremes, a small caliber handgun and a large caliber shotgun, which they've shot neither. So it was an interesting challenge to try to figure out what's going to be best for them.
How do you recommend that someone find the gun that's right for them? Like they're new to the gun world. Maybe they're thinking about CCW or whatever it's called in whatever state you're in. And, what's the path to figure out what's the right gun for them?
That's a great question. The first question they need to ask is, hey, what's the purpose of my firearm? Because, there are a number of purposes. Number one, hey, I just would like a gun for self-defense. That's usually a pretty primary purpose for most people. Or, I think of self-defense, but more importantly, competition's important to me. I want to start training maybe on the range, or I just want to go and have fun. It's a good family experience. My son and myself, or my daughter and myself, we have a great time in the range. It's something we tried and we experienced. I see a lot of families coming in, fathers and sons, fathers and daughters, mothers and daughters coming in. And it's something they can share. They can meet at the range. They can go for an hour. They can have a good time together. They can experience that confidence of being able to go out there and do this thing. enjoy each other, have that bond between them and move on. So that gun's obviously a different requirement than a gun that's going to be home for your home defense. That's a different requirement than a firearm that you'd ideally use for self-defense on a personal carry basis out in the general public. So that first question comes in is, what's the purpose of the firearm? What am I looking for? Or am I just looking for something that is historically significant to me or has meanings? Sometimes people buy firearms or even replica firearms simply because it's what my grandfather shot in World War II, or it's my first thing that I fell in love with as a teenager on a video game was this, and we always have these reasons for why we do things. So any of those would be my first choice. My second one would be go and try samples of that gun. Go to FT3, come in, rent a firearm, bring a friend, rent a firearm. You can try all the different guns in the case and find which one works best for your hand. And what I mean by that is, we come in a lot of times with these preconceived ideas. Marketing's great. Glock and Springfield, they always do a wonderful job of marketing, but that gun might not be what's right for you. Right. Guns are very, very personal things. And when you put that gun in your hand, does it feel like it belongs there? Does it point well? And always when I'm having people work with firearms for the first time, when they're sampling guns, is which gun are you most accurate with? Don't worry about anything else about the gun. But when I point that gun and discharge that firearm, am I accurate with that gun? And if they are, that's a good starting point for them. You don't want the gun that you have to fight to make accurate, because you're not going to put realistically the time, effort, and energy into making that happen. People don't have that kind of commitment these days. So it's much easier to find that firearm that works immediately out of the box for them, and then they can hone those skills, and it's a shorter learning cycle for them.
What I think is interesting too is I'm always explaining to women who are thinking about getting a gun, I'm like, look, everyone always likes to go, oh, I want the small, cute thing because I'm small. And I'm like, yep. You got to also understand that that's a harder gun to control, the smaller it
Absolutely.
is. The bigger it is, the heavier it is, the easier it is to control. Yep. So don't necessarily go for it because it's small and you're small and you think that that's going to look cute.
Yeah, I'm actually going to tell you something that seems pretty counterintuitive. Whenever people ask me, what's the first gun I should buy, even though I want to eventually conceal carry, is a full-size firearm. You should start with a full-size firearm for a number of reasons. One, it's easier to hold on to. The sight radius is going to be longer, so you're going to be more accurate with the gun, which is going to build your confidence. It's easier to work all the control systems on the gun because they're larger. And once you master that larger gun and get that recoil and build those, for lack of a better term, muscle memories for that gun and get your consistency built up, it's much simpler than to move backwards to a smaller firearm and apply those good fundamentals that you've honed at the range of that large firearm for consistency, and then pick up that small gun and be much more successful with it. I see this all the time, that people get small guns because they buy, well, I want small, I want to be able to carry it, I want it at home, I don't want it taking up a lot of room. And they don't enjoy that firearm at all because it has higher recoil, the controls are smaller, they're less successful shooting the gun without proper training. So they suffer more with that firearm, and that leads to a lack of confidence, which leads to a lack of interest, which means that they'll walk away from that firearm and they won't go back. So start yourself off with success, get yourself a full-size firearm, get out to the range, get some training, find out how to use that gun right, and come back. And you have to come back and follow it up again and follow it up some more. And you don't necessarily have to keep following that with an instructor. But I do recommend that because people have a tendency of leading themselves down bad paths. I see this all the time. We'll spend quite a bit of time with somebody. We'll do back-to-back lessons for a couple of weeks, and we'll get them going down some good paths. And then they think they're ready, so they go off on their own, and they start shooting, and they'll start to have a small problem. And the problem is that we don't like to walk away when we're having a problem. They'll stay and they'll shoot, 100 more rounds of bad, and that develops a bad habit for them. They'll come up with some correction. They'll come up with something great. They'll squeeze harder, or they'll start using their thumb, or they'll tilt their head, or stand in a different position to correct that. And then they come back the next time, and that correction doesn't work. So then they find something else, and now they've kind of thrown away everything they trained and worked on. So then they come back to me, and we spend another week or two destroying all that bad information and rewriting all good information, putting back on a good path. So it's important that when you do practice, you practice well. And 5 great shots at a range that you do everything correctly is much more efficient and better for you than 500 terrible rounds. You end up having to change your body position, everything else, just to get on target, because you're fundamentally doing something wrong. And that's where you need to call help in. It's okay to ask for help when it comes to firearms. They just, as much as we'd all like to think we can get it, we really can't sometimes. It takes help.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's say someone right now is thinking to themselves, hey, you know what? I've had so many people reach out to me personally, and they're like, Pete, I think you were the smart one in getting your CCW. Now I want to get my CCW. And I'm like, okay. Sweet. For one, I'm happy every time I hear that. But okay, so let's say someone like in Orange County, we actually have the freedom to get a CCW here.
We do, yeah.
Which is good for the whole state of California. Well, technically, I think like 26 states, but someone who wants to get their CCW, what are their steps? Like, what should they be thinking to get the CCW? Once they've got the CCW, what kind of training should they be doing after that? Like, I'm obviously a big believer in training, one, because for me, it's a hobby that I actually enjoy. I love just going and shooting, and I want to get better. And, you know, I'm pissed that Scott's as good as he is, and I don't think I'll ever be as quick or as accurate as him, but I want to be.
He's very quick. He's not terribly accurate, but he's very quick. It's good to be young.
He's accurate enough to beat us all, so it doesn't really matter.
He hasn't taken me yet, so
okay.
You know, it helps when he's half your age. You know, everything's better when you're a little bit younger. Everything's much faster. But the first thing is some preparatory work. Here in Orange County, it's if you live in Orange County, Don Barnes, the Orange County Sheriff, and the Sheriff's Department is phenomenal when it comes to CCW. I mean, there's over 18,000 CCW carriers here in Orange County. That number has grown exponentially since 2009. It's just been huge. And we haven't had any instances, which is a great testament to the training that is being provided by the instructors here in Orange County and the system they've put in place. So the first step is obviously get on the Orange County website, get on the Orange County Sheriff's website. There's a whole section for CCW. Be prepared, though, because as soon as everything's moved to electronic form these days, you know, when I first started with them, it was all paperwork, and you filled things out and, you know, scanned them back in and sent them in or submitted them. But be prepared. You're going to need some documentation for you. And the first thing you're obviously going to need is you're going to need a good cause statement. It would be nice if it was simply because I fear for my life and I'd like my CCW. And that would be a reasonable reason to have one. But because
that'd be a constitutional reason to have one, but
be a constitutional reason to have one. And it is. Unfortunately, that is tied up in the courts right now. We fought that battle. We kind of won that battle, and then it got the state of California didn't appreciate that win, so they tied it up in the 9th District Court, and it's sitting somewhere. I'm sure it's on a file someplace underneath a whole bunch of other stuff, and they'll get to it eventually. But right now, because of that, excuse me, you still need to have a good cause, and a good cause is really pretty open-ended in Orange County. I mean, I get asked this question: what's a good cause? Well, it depends on what you do. Let's give you an example. Construction workers, anybody self-employed, if you're transporting anything of value, that's a good cause. So even everything from, I had a friend who's an IT guy. Hey, I'm an IT guy for anything, a bank, a group type of thing, but I carry personal information on my laptop from work to home. That would qualify you. That could possibly qualify you with the Orange County Sheriff's Department. Realty agents do a lot of CCW simply because they're doing their shows by themselves. They're in a house, females and males, in a home by themselves. You don't know who's walking through that front door.
Yep.
Excellent reason. Medical personnel of all medicines, everybody from dental hygienists to surgeons are open to that because the way they view it is that they're susceptible to coercion for drugs, angry family members. Again, it's that simple thing. If I'm in scrubs, you have no idea that I'm a dental hygienist or a doctor, that I have access to drugs or I don't. It doesn't really matter. The people are going to victimize those people don't discern that point. Moms, hey, I'm a PTSA mom and I'm on the treasury and I transport the cash and I go make the bank deposits. That's a very valid reason. I spend time in the outdoors. I go camping and hiking and I explore California's wilderness. We've got mountain lions out there. You have transients. You've got people who are out there to cause other people harm. All good reasons. So it doesn't have to be that, I transport jewelry on a daily basis. I have money on me, but it could be anything from I'm just out there exploring the great outdoors of California and I'm at risk because I bring my family with me. So I have to defend myself from animals and people. I'm in a job where I'm meeting people I don't know. Maybe I'm a rental property owner. And at midnight, I've got to go someplace and go deal with a broken pipe. Well, that puts me at risk. Or my tenant's paying cash. That puts me at risk. So just a little bit of thought about what you do, analyze what you do, and be able to articulate that could put you at danger usually is enough for them to do that. So you need that good cause. You'll need some backing documents. Obviously, you own a business licenses, medical licenses, realty licenses, documentation of what's on your truck that makes it so valuable, photographers, equipment, all those kind of things. You need to go get training. Obviously, you have to get training, and you have to get something called a live scan, which is a fingerprint system that goes to the federal database for CCW. Even if you just recently had one because you're a teacher or you got a background check or something else, you have to get it again for the CCW process. You get all that together, You submit your request for training, and usually you submit your request for interview, and usually within 7 to 10 days, you'll get hey, your interview's at this date. Right now, they just got back from being closed from COVID, so they're a couple of weeks behind. They're working really hard.
Were they doing them? Were they doing them like Zoom, or were they?
Yeah, they're doing them just like you and I are doing it today. You'll sit down with the investigator. They'll set up a Zoom call. You punch in, and you'll sit there and make sure you don't have all the stuff in your background that zombie killer and all that kind of your AR hanging on the wall in the background.
Your 3%er badge, your
3%er badge, and all that stuff, and answer the call in camos. But you should be fine from that standpoint. But yeah,
what's funny to me is in Orange County, when I went for my interview, everyone taking the interview, suit and tie. Yeah. Everyone picking up their card, jeans, sweatshirt.
Well, yeah, you want to make that good impression. I didn't show up like I dressed like an instructor.
I literally took the oversized Bible, the Thomas Kincaid Bible that we've got. I'm like, hey, I'm going in there with this.
That's where I keep my gun. So, you'll do your interview, and you'll submit everything electronically. Obviously, they're going to read through that. Your good cause you write on electronic stuff, keep it pretty oblique. You just want to have a general, because they're gonna finish that out with you. They're gonna sit there and talk to you about your good cause, and it's your chance to flush that out and make it a viable good cause for you. And you need to pay attention to the questions that they ask you. So, I remember having this conversation with a dentist recently who was trying to get his, and I said, they're going to ask you, since you're in the medical profession, do you have access to drugs? And he's like, well, no. Nothing real specific, nothing great. I'm like, I know, but you're in the medical profession. Do you have any access to any type of drugs at all? And he's like, well, no. I'm like, you need to think about this, because if you keep answering no, you're taking away the availability to get your license. And he's like, well, I can get. I'm like, there you go. Yes, you can get. So as long as you can get. He's like, you're right. If you think about it, we do have the stuff that, the Novocaine, things like that. I'm like, that's what they're thinking about. He goes, well, I was thinking about, like pills and things like that. I said, no, it's whatever you have access to. So as a dentist, he has obviously access to Novocaine, but he wasn't equating that as the drugs he was thinking of. So you have to think about their questions, listen to them, answer honestly. And 90% of the time, more than 90% of the time, they'll help you out. Hey, I need a little bit more information about this. Send me that, and we'll be good to go. Once you go through your interview process, you can now do your training prior to your interview process. Virtually every certificate issued by the instructors that are licensed with the Orange County Sheriff's Department is good for about 120 days. So get your training. There's minimum requirements for training with the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and the instructors take varied approaches on this. So they all have to meet the minimum requirements. The minimum requirements are that you have to be able to shoot all of your firearms at a target at 3, 5, and 7 yards. So every gun that you want to put on your license has to function. Okay. So
and let's face it, if you can't hit it at 3 yards, you probably
shouldn't be carrying a gun.
Probably shouldn't be carrying a gun. Yeah.
So there's no pre-qualifier for CCW. Anybody can show up. I mean, we get students who show up on Friday for a Saturday class that have never fired a firearm in their life. They don't even know how the gun goes back into the holster, but we'll get them through it. That's our job. So we can't really reject you. We can't turn you away. We can train you multiple times, but we can't say, no, you can't have your license because you're too much of a danger. Now, if you're completely unsafe and a danger, we do have other recourses we can take, but really we don't have any precursors. We can't do anything there. So you have to fire at 3, 5, and 7 yards. You can't have a training that's less than 4 hours, but you can't have a training that's more than 16 hours. And that's
Didn't they change isn't it like a minimum of 16 now for first time?
No, it still can't be more than 16, but it has to be at least, well, for the requalifier, it has to be 4. And for, I think the beginning, don't hold me to this. Don't hold my feet to this. I think it's 4 to 8. I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
The reason I don't remember this thing is because it's not important to me, because we train for 16 hours.
Right.
So it's simple. We keep it simple. You train for 16 hours with us. It's over a weekend. It's 2 days, Saturday, Sunday, and 8 hours of that's on the range. It's all out of concealment, and you will shoot it way more than 3, 5, and 7. I mean, in the trainings that we offer with All Safe Defense, we do moving and shooting, barricade work, high, low light. We put you in. We teach you how to use a flashlight. We really teach you how to gunfight, because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about how to defend yourself with a firearm in an aggressive situation, in a chaotic, aggressive situation. So it's better than just standing at a range and shooting 3, 5, and 7, because that's not what's going to happen in real life. So we try to train you the best that we can for that moment in real life that you're going to face, and you don't know what that circumstance is going to be. So the longer the training you can get from any instructor, the better off you're going to be. Across the board, though, no matter how long they are, they're all about the same cost. Almost every single instructor runs about $200 for their training, regardless if it's the 4-hour, 8-hour, or 16-hour. They're all about that. You've got ammunition. Most of your instructor is going to run between 250 to 500 rounds of ammunition. You've got the cost of the gun. You need a holster. You need some mag carriers. You need some additional magazines. You're going to need some eye and ear protection. So you've got an initial investment and the process of the gun, the live scan. Figure right around, if you're buying a gun for CCW, right around $1,000 to $1,200 investment to get your first CCW. If you already own the firearm, obviously you can take $500 to $800 out of that, and you're still at the $800 mark or so for everything involved. About 45-day process. So once you go through everything, submit your training certificate, the sheriff's approves you, they'll contact you back. You go down, you'll physically pick, well, they're mailing right now. They'll mail you your license because they took your picture and they did those things in your fingerprint. They'll get that information. They'll send you your license. That's good for 2 years. And then in about a year and a half, you start the process of renewal, and you go through the renewal process. So, and you start again. So every 2 years, you get that license. Now, that license is very limited in the sense that it's only, and I like to emphasize this, it's only a license to carry a concealed weapon. It's not a license to use that gun in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Use of that firearm opens up Pandora's box, and you get into a lot of legal sticky wickets once that gun comes out. Once that gun's displayed and it's used, even if it's to defend yourself, you're going to have to prove that need for defense very affirmatively. So it becomes a whole different scenario once you use it. But again,
and let's face it, in California, you're pretty much screwed if you have to use a gun. I mean, you're going to have to fight and spend every dime you got. Get the insurance, right? There's plenty of those insurance companies. I've got 2 of them right now because I'm freaking paranoid. And I'm like, look, I'm in California. I guarantee you if I have to use the gun or even just pull it from the holster, my life's going to be turned upside down.
Well, anytime a firearm is involved in anything in our life, it can be a life-changing situation. I mean, just, even inside your own home. I don't have a CCW, but I'm in my own home, defending my home, and somebody's come in and they're threatening my life, and a gun becomes involved in the situation. It becomes a significant change for everybody. It is a tool of last resort. It should always be a tool of last resort, especially for a CCW carrier. One of the things that I like to emphasize in CCW is avoidance, evadance, and defense. So first off, avoid any situation that you'd ever need to pull your gun in. We do the best you can. Make right choices. Make good decisions. Don't go out, the theater at night. Well, you can't go out theaters anymore because it's quarantine, but don't go out in the dark alleys at night. Don't go buy gas at 2 a.m. Don't put yourself in the possibility that you're going to get into a confrontation. Protect yourself the best you can. Be aware of your surroundings, that type of thing. If you get caught by surprise by something that happens to you in a public space, a mass shooter or somebody attacking other people, evade it. Get away from it as fast as you can and get out of the situation as you can. If the last resort you get cornered and blocked and then you have to defend it, do everything you can to defend it. De-escalate it first verbally if you can. If you have to brandish and show the weapon to help defensively de-escalate that, do that. And the last thing you want to do is be pointing that gun at somebody and possibly engaging them. But if that's all the choice you have left, then you probably built yourself a really good case as to why. So what you're looking for is the most colorful reasons that I can explain to somebody as to why I did this. It's much better to do that than be like, well, this happened, I pulled my gun and shot him. That's a black and white situation. But if I can sit there and, hey, I avoided it, I ran down the hall, I went this direction, he chased me, and I ended up in a corner, and I told him no, and somebody's video camera witnessed it, and they see them, no, don't come near me, don't pull that knife, I've got a gun, stay away, and I finally get my gun out, and I'm still holding my gun low, and please don't help me, please don't hurt me, and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, and they keep approaching me, and I apply some shots into that person and engage them. That's a colorful story. That's lots of crayons I can use to fill those gaps in for that DA and the police officers, and it becomes definitely a defensive situation. So that's what you're looking for. Is if I have to do it, I have got to have gone through every step before on that process. Especially if I make other choices. Say some people say I carry pepper spray. Okay, well, you better have used that pepper spray before you engage with your firearm. Okay, because that's going to be quite. Why didn't you just use the pepper spray? They're right there. They're right on top of you. Why didn't why do you let it get there? So I'm not, controversially, I'm not a huge advocate of carrying pepper spray and tasers if you're going to carry a firearm, because it already puts these 2 things in front of you that for a consumer, non-police, for a consumer, that person has to be very close to you to engage those 2 things. A physical taser I have to touch them with, which means they're within touching distance, of me, which is no distance that I'd want somebody close to me. And my pepper spray is good for about 15 feet. Well, for your average consumer who doesn't practice on a regular basis, who carries a gun, maybe puts a little bit of time in at the range, that 15 feet is way too close. And that's going to be definitely a life-threatening zone for them. So trying to get that pepper spray out. So it's easier to make the choice of, hey, keep them at bay at a farther distance with your firearm than to go through those two other layers, which are going to put them in incredibly close contact with me. And then trying to deploy a firearm is going to put them at a much higher life risk level.
Yeah. Wow. Let's say someone they've gone through that, in which, by the way, I got my CCW. I took the class from All Safe Defense. Mm-hmm. And I totally remember going through the training. It was 4 hours back then. I know it's longer today because they changed the law. So, and you guys always did the 16 hour.
Actually, I'll say we've always done the 16 hour. Yeah. They adapted to us.
Did they?
We didn't adapt to them. Yeah, the maximum we could ever do is 16 hours. So right. We always did the maximum. We've always done TJ and All Safe has always done the maximum. They finally changed the law to say, hey, yeah, you got to do more. Because some others are quite a few instructors that were doing an hour. They would do 1 hour. They take you $200. They do an hour. You'd sit there for 40 minutes listening to them talk, and then you go out on the range and qualify 3, 5, and 7. They'd be like, "Okay, you're good to go. How am I going to sign off on you?" And those people would scare me to death.
Yeah,
to be out on the range. So
the thing that I remember the most from that training, I mean, and it was literally the first class of any type of training I'd ever taken. They really emphasized, I think it was RHF, run, hide, fight. And they gave example after example, and they'd go around to everyone in the room. What would you do in this situation? Let's say, I think the first one was you walk into a convenience store. Some guy's got a gun pulled on the cashier. What do you do? And everyone's going around, and one lady's like, I'd shoot him in the knee, right? Like she's a sharpshooter all of a sudden. And, 25 feet, don't worry about the adrenaline pumping through you. I'll shoot him in the knee, right? Yeah. But everyone was going through there. And what we didn't know when we were doing this exercise is that these were real life situations that he was giving us. Yeah. And he's like, well, what you didn't understand is that the getaway car had another guy in it who was armed. And, you only saw part of this. And he goes, 99% of the time someone's robbing a place, they don't want to shoot anybody. They just want to take the money.
Yeah, they don't want to engage either.
And if you raise the stakes, if you all of a sudden, now it's like, okay, now I've got to do something. You've got a gun, I've got a gun. We've just, so he was like, run, hide, fight. Run first, become a great witness, hide. Yeah. Fight only if you absolutely have to. And I remember that was the biggest takeaway I got was do not pull your gun unless it is literally like, I'm going to die or my kids are going to die. Yep. That's it. That's the only reason I'm pulling this thing. Otherwise, whatever. Just take my crap. Take it.
Even myself, I carry on an extremely regular basis. I'm licensed to carry a gun. I teach CCW. The last thing I ever want to do is pull my gun. I will do everything else in my power before I have to pull my firearm. And I'm confident in my skills of pulling a firearm, but I don't want to do it in any way, shape, or form. I will go and run. I will go and hide. I'll be an excellent witness. That's one of the best things you can be is an excellent witness. Get as much information as you can. Let it play out. And you're going to have to make, I run through All Safe before CCW. It's not required by the Orange County Sheriff's Department. We offered a program. I developed a program a couple of years ago, actually about 5 years ago now, called Pre-CCW. And it's a class that walks through the psychology of CCW, how it's going to change your life, the things you need to think about. And we do a lot of those things. Plus, in the second half of the class, we get up and you learn how to start drawing out of a gun because most people have never drawn out of a holster. They've never drawn out of concealment, obviously, before. And we kind of walk through Saturday and Sunday's class. So you have a feeling of what it's like to be downrange because, again, most people have gone to a range and they've shot in that stall. They've had those two side barriers and they've looked straight ahead. But they've never been downrange where somebody's standing right next to them on their left and right next to them on the right. There's physically no barrier and the brass is hitting them in the face. Do I pick my magazines up when I want to? I mean, how do I do things? So we walk them through all that. But in that class, we go through we have some videos. We go through actual live scenarios of shootings. We walk through them, break them down, and we talk about things with people. So it's a lot about how to do things. And the one thing that we always get to is being a good witness. You've always got to go back to being a good witness because everything goes down. There's one video we have that has multiple shots fired. And I give you one chance to hear it. And then I go around the room and I ask everybody to tell me how many shots were fired. And rarely does anybody get it right. So they hear it, they watch it, and they watch it again, and they still don't get it right the second time. A few people pick up on it. But it's always interesting because of what they're focused on. There's so many things that are happening in these videos that I'm like, now, if you're just the outside person watching this video and you're not even seeing what's happening, how would you be if you're the person behind the gun? And that means your focus is even narrower than you watching what's happening from a bird's eye view. And that's usually very telling for them. It's kind of a good experience. They're like, wow, I never think of it that way. So you've got to get in and get them to change their mindset on how they think about things. Again, people come in with the best intentions. I want to protect myself. I want to protect my family. A firearm is a good way to do it. I'm willing to go get a little bit of the training to understand that I feel confident, at least in my competency with my firearm. But then they get into the big picture of really what it means to carry a firearm. And it's much more complicated than just putting something on and walking out a door and hoping for the best. Because if you do that, you're going to make a mistake. It's going to cost you or somebody else their life. And that's just not what we want to do in life. So we want to be as protective as we can of everybody. I mean, my main thing when it comes to CCW is our intention is not to kill or hurt or shoot anybody. I will defend myself to defend my life, but the totality of the circumstances is really going to determine the end result. I'm a participant in that. The assaulter is a participant in that, but nobody defines ultimately what happens. And what happens is going to be everything together that's going to paint that final picture of how that ends. So we don't have that much control over the situation at all, and we certainly don't get to choose when it happens. Somebody else is going to decide when I'm going to have to defend my life, not me.
Yeah. I remember you telling a story, I think it was you, about a guy who had a CCW, and then we had a weird thing happen in Orange County where some guy was out stabbing people one day. He stabbed like 5 or 6 people.
Yeah.
And so this guy was like, you know what? I got a CCW. I don't train. I'm going to go to a class. I think it was you, because you were like, yeah, he was really bad. Like even just pulling the gun and everything. What do you recommend to people who have a CCW or they get their CCW? What kind of training should they just mentally tell themselves, this is the minimum amount of training? I always say minimum because I don't think there's a maximum you can do, right? Just do as much as you can. What is the minimum you would recommend that someone do as far as training?
Well, I would not consider your qualifying course to get your certificate for your Orange County Sheriff's Department CCW a minimum of training.
Right.
That's the minimum to get your qualifying certificate to get your license. After that, then you start your minimum of training. There's lots of places you can go. Even if your minimum of training is finding a range that allows you to draw from a holster and practice your draw. Okay. That'd be like FT3 in Orange County. We allow that. We have a holster qualifier. You can come in during the week, draw from your holster. So you can be a concealed carrier and draw out of your holster and shoot. On Target offers something down in South County. They offer a holster class also. You can come in during the week early before the range opens and just draw from your holster. So there's only 2 ranges I know that allow you to draw out of your holster that's not in a class. It's during public hours. Boom, shoot your gun. That alone is probably the number one skill you need to understand, is how to cleanly, safely to get to the firearm under distress. It's more complicated than it looks like and seems. Getting that clothing out of the way, getting that shirt out of the way, getting it from your purse if you're a woman, or a backpack if you're a guy who's carrying off body. All those things take skill, time, effort, and energy to master. Virtually everybody can apply that gun and affectionately apply customer service, like I call it, when you put some rounds into somebody that's assaulting you. You can do that because once we get the gun up, we know what to do from there. It's getting to that gun is really part of the hardest skill. So focusing on that, getting that actual gun out, because under that stress, if you've only done it once or twice, you're going to fumble, and you really don't have time to fumble. Fumbling is going to cost you time and energy and probably your life. So those things, and then CCW classes. There's a lot of classes I offer. There's a lot of classes. All of the vendors at FT3 offer, All Safe offers. You can come in and practice those skills. Come out and work from your draw stroke, either outside the holster or inside waistband holster, or however you want to do it. Come and get that moving, get that shooting while I'm on the move, applying multiple rounds. Everybody can go into a stall, and at all ranges, the rate of fire is relatively slow. So you don't get the practice of shooting multiple rounds quickly, which is a skill you have to learn. So in those classes, getting to apply multiple rounds, listening to the other instructors on their input and their personal experiences with CCW. I mean, I've had my personal experiences carrying a gun that I try to convey to my students so they can understand where you should be at and what you should be doing.
Where do you carry, by the way? What position?
Where do I carry?
Yeah, what position do you normally carry in?
Well, I'm not going to tell you that. That's a personal question. No.
I'm just curious.
It really depends. 99% of the time, it's appendix. It helps me keep my weight down. Yeah, it helps me keep my weight down. If I get too fat, I can't carry it.
That's the whole reason that I'm losing weight, is I want to appendix carry, and I still can't yet. So I got to.
I squeeze it in there. I do enjoy my food, but I do carry appendix 99% of the time. And then depending on what I'm wearing and the day, what I'm doing for the day, if it's going to be a long day or a short day or type of thing, then I have a holster that I carry basically at the kidney position, or what we call the 430 position. That's a comfortable draw stroke for me too. And since I'm used to it, since I always virtually 7 days a week. I have a holster, outside waistband holster on my strong side 3 o'clock. A lot of times I'll carry there depending on the clothing that I'm wearing. So the clothing that I'm wearing and the situation that I'm in sometimes dictates how I carry.
Yeah. Cool.
But virtually, if it was any given moment, it's most likely appendix.
Yeah. That's one that I think a lot of people have to practice. I think it's one of those, people think it's really cool. Oh, it's appendix carry. And like, if you're shooting retention, it's a different stroke completely, because you got to practice putting that elbow right into your side. And
the biggest thing about it is not muzzling the entire world as you draw that gun out. And that's the mistake most appendix carriers take. They bring their gun straight up, and now they're, this way, muzzling the entire world as they bring that gun around to position. That's not the right way to carry appendix. They think about it from a strong side, where I bring it up and I turn it and my gun's pointed down range, but they make that mistake. So we work a lot on people who carry appendix. There's a couple of really good techniques for carrying a good appendix draw that makes it fast, safe, and reholstering is one of the other things that people don't spend enough time doing. They like to rush the reholster, and you want to do that with deliberance. Reholstering is one of the most dangerous things you can do carrying a gun.
Especially if you carry a Glock like me. Yes. I'm like, ooh, I'm always slow putting that sucker in.
Yeah. I want 3 or 4 people holding everything back, and let me get that in there. It's people, I see it all the time on the range. They shoot and they reholster really quickly. It's like, okay, well, that's
one of the trainings. We had a guy, he was shooting a Glock 26 appendix, and I swear he was just so quick back in. And I'm just like, dude, he is going to lose a ball off of that. He's just going to shoot himself, and that's it.
Yeah, it does happen. Shootings and trainings from students who rush things, don't follow good instruction. It does happen. That's why you're there. You're there to learn these mistakes, and unfortunately, sometimes those mistakes end in injury. They do. It happens. It happens to everybody. It's an unfortunate side effect, but usually and I'm not blaming students in any way. But it's usually a whole series of failures when things go awry in that standpoint. But again, reholstering is extremely dangerous with a firearm, especially a firearm like a striker fired Glock that doesn't have any additional safeties except for that trigger safety. You get a piece of clothing in there, your fingers caught in there, anything you try to force that gun in, you can certainly get a discharge from that. So getting the gun out quickly is an important skill. And one reason that we don't advocate certain holsters like Serpa style holsters with that button on them, those fingers end up on those triggers. There's nothing wrong with thumb drives and things of that nature, but just, for your average civilian, just a good friction level holster that's solid. One of the biggest problems we see in training is people come in and they'll either wear a leather holster or they'll wear one of the neoprene collapsing holsters. And those are fine for comfort and carry because you're not going to be drawing the gun. And if you do get in a defensive situation, obviously you're not going to be reholstering that gun until you're directed to, or probably never once the police arrive. So you don't have to worry that holster's collapsed on you. But in a training situation, when you're training and you're in and out of the holster all day, you want a holster that's going to maintain. When I can put that gun back in there and not have to now put my fingers there and then cover with my muzzle. And we see a lot of that. People buy inappropriate holsters for training. So if you're going to a class, my recommendation is contact the instructor. Ask them, hey, what do you recommend? Not the night before class, not 2 days before class, but out there, once you book your thing, if it's not clearly stated on the instruction, read the websites, read their training information. If it's not there, contact the instructor and say, hey, how much reholstering are we going to need to do? This is what I'm thinking about bringing. Is this appropriate? Is it not appropriate? Because trying to deal with that in class completely defocuses you from your training. And you're spending more time trying not to shoot yourself than you are actually learning what you need to be there for. So that's always a tough part for an instructor.
Right. Well, Michael, I appreciate you taking all this time and sharing all this insight with us. Let me ask you, if people want to attend one of your trainings, where do they go? How do they find out more information?
Well, if you want to attend something through FT3, obviously ft3tactical.com is the best place to go there. Through FT3, as the senior instructor there and the chief RSO, I offer a number of things. Obviously, we have basic classes and we have a whole lot of stuff. But I'm also very proud of, outside of that, I have my women's shooting league called Lady Shooting League, LSL. And you can find that at ladyshootingleague.club, actually, CLUB.club. And also our men's league, Trigger Masters, and you can find that at triggermasters.club. You can find links for both of those right on the FT3 website. If you go to the ft3.com, go to the top, go to training, click right on training, you'll get a link of all of our outside vendors. And of course, LSL and TML are right there. So if you're looking for good self-defense training, those are excellent for both women and men. And we do have combined classes, so you can bring your husband or your spouse or, look for a date if you want to, I guess, if you wanted to. But we do have the dedicated broken up classes. And then also all of our outstanding vendors that are available at FT3. And of course, all safe defense with TJ and I. We teach CCW for Orange County. We'll get you certified. We have additional CCW classes. Through there, I teach my pre-CCW class. So if you want to learn all about carrying a gun, so maybe you haven't made your decision about CCW yet, pre-CCW is a great class to come to learn. I've had people come to that class and walk out and go, you know what? Carrying a gun's not for me. And I'm glad that they made the decision. Or yeah, I'm more dedicated, but now I realize where I'm going to have to do and the things I'm going to have to make adjustments to in life. So that's the point of that class, is kind of help you make a good decision before you take those next steps forward with the Sheriff's Department. So again, all safe defense, FT3 tactical, and LadiesShootingLeague.club and TriggerMasters.club are all great places. You can go and find all that wonderful information. If you want to come spend some time with me on the range, I certainly would appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think I got to sign up because we got class tomorrow night, don't we? Isn't there a combo class?
If you haven't signed up for it yet, I don't think you're making it because we are full.
Is it full? We're bumping someone.
Up.
Someone's getting bumped for me.
We'll talk about it offline.
Well, awesome. Michael, again, appreciate you being on. Appreciate you taking the time. And everybody, if you are interested, if you're in Southern California, absolutely check out Michael's courses. Like I said, I mean, I go to them. I try to go to one or two every month. Obviously, the pandemic kind of screwed everything up there for everybody. But
for about a month, yeah.
But now we're all back, and try and go and all that good stuff. And definitely encourage everyone to do that. If you are listening in another area of the country, then absolutely reach out to your local ranges. Find out who's got good quality training. It has been my experience that most ranges take that very seriously. You might have an independent guy out there. Oh, hey, look, I passed the NRA's RSO class. I can teach. Go to the range, find out who do they recommend, because they're not going to let some yahoo come in and train on their range. They want good quality people where they're not going to have issues with them. So, look up your local range. Certainly check out Lake Erie Arms. They're in Ohio. They've got all kinds of training that they work with their providers. So definitely do that as well. Anyway, again, Michael, thanks so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. You're
all
welcome.
right, take
Thank
care,
you very much
everybody.
for asking.
You've been listening to the From Concealment Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.